We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
2024 is the year when the pushback begins in earnest.
People ain't seen nothing yet. That's what I keep telling people.
It is a master-servant relationship where we, the governed, are the masters.
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
You press down enough on people for long enough, you leave them no choice but to rebel.
So, no, I don't want to forget about it, and I won't shut up about COVID.
The story of the unvaccinated is still yet to be told.
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the XCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp, joined again by Mr. Adam Zara and also by Paul Vallejo tonight. Now, firstly, Adam, how was your week? I see you've got the Independent for Campbelltown moniker under there, so you're fired up, ready to go?
Fired up. I'm on the New South Wales Electoral Commission, starting to get my knowledge up, started to recruit a former guest of ours on the show. To try and help me get through the paperwork and stuff like that. So looking forward to get back into campaign mode and see if we can make a real difference at the local government level, I guess, this time. So we can see that the globalists are coming in not only from the top levels, but they're also coming in from the bottom levels too. And we can see we might be able to have a lot more positive effect from the lower side. Everyone wants federal and state. But not many people seem to contend for the local council, and we can probably get in at the ground roots and really make a name for ourselves there and make a difference.
Before I get to you, Paul, we'll just quickly get through some of the housekeeping stuff because we've got a big guest tonight and we want to get into that as quickly as possible. But I will let you know about Buy Me a Coffee. If you do want to support us, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars there. It just helps with the stream and it makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside as well. So please head to Buy Me a Coffee, and if you want to contribute to us there, you can. You can also head to our T-shirt shop and then buy an X-Candidates or Commanding the Narrative T-shirt. That would be much appreciated. And walk around your area in style and go up to some politicians and just nudge them in the shoulder and say, "Hey, you need to go on this show here," and be interviewed by these guys. So. If you can do that and head to the T-shirt shop, it's just xcandidates.tshirts.net.au. And finally, just quickly, this weekend, this man is going to be at the DYRSL, Mr. Dick Smith. He's going to be presenting at the 2024 Environment and Energy Forum. We're very excited to announce this. If you haven't got your tickets already, you better jump in there and get them. There's actually even a 2-for-1 deal at the moment. So there's no excuse not to get tickets. You can get tickets on the door, but if you want to be safe, and sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry, jump onto Eventbrite. I'll put the link in the show notes. You can come and watch Dick and interact with Dick Smith, one of the great Australians. Craig Kelly's also going to be there. Craig Kelly's going to be on the Q&A panel, so you'll be able to see Craig as well. Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. Senator Malcolm Roberts, that's going to be a good one. Senator Malcolm always speaks.
Fires up the crowd.
He fires up, and I'm sure he'll be fired up on Sunday. Dr. Peter Ridd was there last year, and I'm sure he'll be fantastic. And the amazing Alexandra Marshall of The Spectator and ADH TV, and a former guest of the X-Candidates, she'll be hosting the Q&A. So a huge lineup of people. There's going to be some talk on nuclear energy. There's going to be a lot of I think the unsung heroes of this event will be the people from rural communities that are coming all the way from Sydney. Some of these people speak very passionately. They're fantastic people, and they're really up against it. They need the support of the city to get behind them. So if you are anywhere near DY, please get to this event. It's going to be really, really fantastic. So again, head to Eventbrite and you can get your tickets. Now, Mr. Paul Vallejo, welcome back again. You're an excellent contributor to both the X-Candidates and Commanding the Narrative. You've lined up an amazing, incredible international guest tonight. You want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, I have to say, Dr. Haider is one of my COVID heroes. You know, when we were all locked down, locked away, when the doctors forgot their duty of care and told us just, to stay in our homes until we turned blue and then go to the hospital. Certain doctors around the world stepped up to try to help patients. When the FDA and the CDC and a lot of doctors dropped their duty of care. And among those doctors is Dr. Syed Haider, who is with us tonight. He's one of my heroes of the pandemic, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to him tonight. I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Haider, and looking forward to talking to you.
Well, we're excited as well, so let's bring him on. Dr. Haider, welcome to the XCandidates.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very, very grateful for what you've done over the last few years. And I know, it takes no small measure of personal courage to step up against the machine that, I think everyone was surprised that we ran into when we tried to say something that was off the script, but particularly doctors who, had to weave a very careful path to avoid all kinds of different trouble that, we were against, in my view, what we could see is like a bit of an unseen enemy, trying to make sure that there was no alternative treatments. So, I think there's a lot to get into. Thank you. Stephen, I think one of the things, that's a good introduction is to talk about how we have a new COVID wave coming to Australia. And you look at the news, you see that there's a lot of talk about the new variant, and a lot of people I know around us getting sick, actually. And the wastewater measures in New Zealand are showing a spike that's worse than what we've seen in the last year. There's kind of a cool link. It's poops.nz that shows you, that for the last year, this current one is on an exponential rise. And the variant is, they call it the flirt variant for some reason that I can't quite grasp.
Flirting with death, Paul, that's why.
Yeah.
It would be a great opportunity to get in someone who has been bravely treating COVID patients and long COVID patients very well over the last few years. I've known about his expertise. I've recommended his services to my American friends. One of the things that I would like to start off maybe with a bang and talk about how we kind of don't know exactly what's coming next, Dr. Haider. One of the things I recognize in your work is that you deeply research a lot of the tests and treatments, and you have an outside of the box thinking of how do we prepare for what might come next, because we don't know, whether it's going to be weaponized H5N1, or you even have in your go-to stack a smallpox treatment. You mind telling us a little bit about that and how, because you're the only person I've ever seen who has that treatment on their list.
Yeah, sure. So, the smallpox treatment, I just put it up there when monkeypox became a thing. I don't think the vast majority of people really have to worry about monkeypox. I think by now we've kind of covered that in enough detail that it's really only a risk for, men who have sex with men, homosexual men, gay men. But I put it up there because people are worried. And I think that the biggest risk that people really face is becoming afraid. And whether or not they have a reason to be afraid, it's kind of hard to go and tell somebody there's nothing to be afraid of, right? Like they've taken it in, and there's probably hundreds of thousands of people who watch people online like myself, right? They look at my tweets, they watch my videos, and I can't sit with each one of them in their home and really allay all of their fears. And so sometimes you're left with a second best option where, like, okay, if you're going to feel better, that you have this, bottle of an herb on hand that has been shown to work against smallpox and monkeypox both, just as well as, the medications that you can get for them, which actually you have difficulty getting. You can't really get your hands on those medications. Then maybe that's, good enough for that person. And right? People all across, some people who don't venom, and there's people who are convinced that it's COVID, and so whoever I'm speaking to, I'm speaking to all of these people when I get online. They're different stages in their fear response, and looking at this is that for the vast majority of people, it was based when COVID, the flu COVID went to whatever 32 million cases, and it was basically an average, number of illnesses for a flu year. Maybe slightly worse than normal.
Oh, we just lost him.
We've just had a loss for a second, guys. We'll see if he comes back on.
It is an interesting point about in order to try to allay people's fears, one of the best ways to combat being afraid is being more prepared. And, that's one of the things that I've tried to focus on, because clearly, something has gone wrong in the last few years in terms of my sense of whether the government is here to serve us or control us. And so, if once the systems that you think are on your side sort of get a bit reversed, well, then you have some work to do to perhaps prepare for harder times. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm still trying to put together what was a little bit broken up as he was speaking regarding, the snake venom. And I did hear snake venom and COVID and things like that. So I did hear a few of those words. And I'm kind of like, I've heard a lot of the groups, that we speak to outside of this, stand in the park and stuff like that. And people start talking about different things that they've heard. And I was just like, oh, the snake venom thing, is that even true?
Yeah, so, I don't think it is. I think a number of the proteins are similar to what's in snake venom. There are a lot of things that have similar proteins. There was some work by one particular set of doctors who said that that it was either similar or it was snake venom. I don't think that work is remotely correct. I think the point he was trying to make is that one of the things he deals with is a lot of people who are afraid. Yeah. And kind of rightly so. The last few years have been quite scary, and there's been a lot of uncertainty. Like what is this new disease? When it first came out, and you had the people in China falling straight over and face planting on the concrete, and originally we were told it had a 4% case fatality rate. That would change the world. And one of the strange things is that people were afraid enough that there was a poll that Democrats in the United States believed there was a 40% chance, 40% chance that if you got COVID, you'd end up in the hospital. That's how much they managed to ramp. The fear was the objective. And that's how much they managed to ramp up to the fear. They were off by a factor of, I think, 1,000.
Oh, man, guys, when did I drop out? Yeah, I didn't even realize.
You were breaking up a little bit, and then
I'll keep this screen up.
Because
hold on, I have this.
Okay, yeah. We'll kind of carry on when you're ready, Dr. Haider.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm gonna keep the screen up because usually I go out onto a different screen. I didn't see that I dropped out. Sorry about that. When did I drop out?
You're talking about snake venom.
Okay.
I got that.
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, basically what I was saying is that people got really afraid during the pandemic, and this really affects your immunity, right? So fear is going to significantly detract from your body's ability to fight off anything. And so the most important thing is to address fear. And some people will need to address that by buying something, right? And depending on how much money you have, you might need to spend a lot of money to make yourself feel comfortable, right? So, I mean, most of the things that you need to do aren't super expensive, but some people are going to be spending like $400 or $500, to get some ivermectin, to get some, some vitamins and some supplements. And so this is one of the reasons that I researched smallpox and monkeypox, was because people are afraid of biowarfare nowadays. And there's a lot of people who just want to be prepared just in case, and it's really hard to assess the risk of something like this, right? A biowarfare attack with smallpox. Some people think we've been in World War III for years now. It's just kind of like a slow burning, gradually worsening, eventually it might explode into something much worse. And as part of World War III, have this, some people call it 5th generation warfare, where sometimes you don't even know you've been attacked, right? Like your government, if you get attacked, might kind of downplay it and be like, oh, nothing happened, don't worry about it. You know, there's no such, you know, they might say there's smallpox, they might actually say there's no smallpox. They might, you know, people might start thinking, look, this looks kind of like smallpox, you know, and the government might be so afraid of people panicking that they might say, oh, there's nothing to see here, it's something else, you know, and, you know, they don't even let it into the media. So anyway, for these concerns, you know, I went and researched Sarracenia purpurea, which was used by, I think, the Mi'kmaq Indians in Canada, in the Canadian, you know, wilderness in the 1800s. And, you know, smallpox was devastating American and Canadian Indians back then, and it had been brought from Europe. And so they discovered a plant that helped, you know, deal with it. And some Westerners actually saw what they were using and published some case series about it in the New England Journal of Medicine, British Medical Journal. And then in 2012, I think it was, somebody at University of Arizona, a scientist there, studied it in a test tube and did like head-to-head trials in the test tube against the drugs that the U.S. Strategic National Stockpile holds for smallpox and monkeypox, right? They're the same drugs, cidofovir, TPOXX, things like that. And those drugs are unavailable to the general public. You have to be in like a hospital or a clinic, get diagnosed, and then the doctor has to fill out like, you know, a dozen forms, and they have to get it straight from the US government. Otherwise, you can't just go to a pharmacy with a prescription and get these drugs to keep on hand. And so the level of evidence for the drugs that we have is the same level of evidence that we have for Sarracenia purpurea. So I was like, you know what, you know, people want something to keep on hand. They want like an emergency medicine kit. So this could be a part of that, and at least make them less afraid of biowarfare attack, that I have something in case smallpox or monkeypox starts going around. And it's kind of the same as people being afraid of COVID or really anything. You know, we went through 2 years of the worst fear porn of our lives, right? It was 24/7 fear just emanating from every screen and from every person in your life. And like, no one could escape it. It was inescapable. Okay. I mean, unless you were like an Amish person or something, you just like right from the start, if you were just like, oh, there's nothing here, viruses don't exist, you know. So there were a tiny percentage of the population that probably escaped the fear. But like, it's very difficult, because I recently saw this thing on social media where you have like, people are trying to startle other people. So like, somebody acts like there's something horrible going on and like starts screaming and runs out of the room. The people in the room with them do the exact same thing. They have no idea what's going on, right? They even like look and act exactly the same as the person who triggered that, right? Fear response. Like, it was so hilarious. I don't know if you guys saw this video, but there was this lady sitting there with her like giant, you know, black boyfriend in the living room, and she starts freaking out and screaming and looking at the floor, and then she runs out of the room and jumps, like as though she's jumping over something. And the big giant black guy does the exact same thing. He jumps the exact same, even though he doesn't see anything on the floor, right? As though there's a snake or something. And this is you know, it's a response that's like deeply ingrained in us, because otherwise we would have died out a long time ago. Our genes, you know, our genetic, you know, our ancestors would not have lived to give birth to us, right? So if somebody on the savannah saw something, you know, horrifying, and they ran away from it, everyone had to run, right? Like on a moment's notice. So this is hardwired into human beings, and it's there for a reason. And unfortunately, you know, the powers that be, they can, you know, use these kind of fear responses and things that are hardwired into us for our benefit against us. And so I think
it did. Yeah. I mean, a lot, so the people that we were talking when you were away for a little while about the videos of the people falling straight over on their face in China. They also, you know, there was a survey that said 40% of Democrats thought, it was 40%, or the Democrat voters, they thought if you got COVID, there was a 40% chance you would go in the hospital. And, you know, and they were off by a factor of, I think, 1,000. The fear was so high that people thought, yeah, it was literally that serious. You got sick, you know, there was 40% chance you were going to go on event. And so, and that, you know, but the fear was, it seems, the objective. You know, at some point, many of us realized we were getting played. I realized we were getting played when they tested hydroxychloroquine at the wrong time and the wrong dose. And I'm like, okay, something is seriously wrong. And other people realized that they got played at a different time. Some people saw through it from the very beginning. I didn't. But then it was a new thing to be afraid of. It wasn't the virus. It was, what the heck is the government trying to do to us? That, and some fears are irrational, some are rational. And when it comes to the smallpox, and a biowarfare, is that a completely irrational fear? I mean, it's not like they would create a bioweapon in a lab and release it. That's nuts, right?
Well, I mean, so certainly it's, smallpox. Another thing that another reason that I created Sericina purpurea, this smallpox, monkeypox treatment, was because I came across this study showing that they had recreated horsepox from scratch in a lab setting. And horsepox is, very similar to smallpox. The idea was that like anyone with like $100,000 and like a high school lab could order all these things online, just the basic building blocks of a virus online. The sequence of the virus is known. They keep it in 4 separate repositories, but you can get it. You can get all 4 pieces and put them together. It's not really that hard to recreate smallpox. So it's like, a terrorist group, a government, a foreign government, the Chinese or, whoever, the Russians, I mean, whatever, we're attacking them, they're attacking us. And again, we could be attacked with something like this and the government denies it or they play off of it for some reason. They could say, oh, there's nothing going on. So yeah, again, as long as you believe in viruses, I think it's a possibility that could happen. I mean, some people believe in viruses, but they don't believe they can go pandemic the way that we were told that they did, unless you're like they can't go viral by themselves. They can't spread that broadly by themselves. And I don't, I'm not enough of a virologist to be able to, properly say. I mean, I honestly don't have a strong opinion on the matter, but if the government wanted to get everyone sick, they would just have to go everywhere and spray everyone with the virus, right? Like even if it couldn't spread on its own, they could still spray it, wherever they wanted to and get people sick with it. So there are obviously risks in the world. And, one of the risks is that your government gets kind of infiltrated, and some of our governments have probably been infiltrated for decades, and it's just gotten worse over time. And so, I mean, it seems that there's parts of the US government, the deep state, that are almost like fighting against the American people, right? Like as though they've been taken over by some foreign power and, making all these unforced errors. And certainly one of the most heavily suppressed narratives of the pandemic was that the Department of Defense was really in charge of the entire pandemic response. And that the Department of Defense, you go beyond that, the entire vaccine industry is really set up and designed by the Department of Defense in order, and I don't know whether they really believe in vaccines or not. Maybe it's just like, well, maybe they work, maybe they don't, but we need to keep this whole thing running in case we get attacked by a foreign adversary and they use biowarfare. We have to have a running vaccine industry in place. And the only way to be able to go from no vaccine to like 200 million shots of something in case of biowarfare attack is to have an industry that's constantly churning out vaccines. Okay, so you have to inject them into somebody, right? So I think that the entire like childhood vaccine thing, it's really just an arm of the Department of Defense in order to keep the machinery going, to keep the know-how there. So kind of like if you believe in the moon landing, apparently we lost the technology, right? The technology is gone now because no one used it, right? So technologies can be discovered, they can be refined, and then you can lose them. You can lose the ability to like even recreate them because the people died who used to know how to do it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can't just put into manuals. It's a lot of stuff is like deeply held knowledge within human beings, and when the human beings die, the knowledge is just lost, and it takes a lot of effort to recreate it from scratch, as you can see, trying to go to the moon now. So anyway, this is basically what's going on with vaccines. And one of the things that got me to realize that was that pediatrics in general, like the pediatrics as a specialty, looks like it wouldn't really exist without vaccines. Okay, so like half or more of their revenue comes from giving vaccines. And I published a post on this, like going through the numbers. and their overhead cover, takes away half of their revenue. So like literally they would be making no money after overhead if they weren't giving vaccines. And then unfortunately the vaccines themselves cause damage, and then people come back to be treated by the pediatrician later and by the adult physicians, right? So it's kind of like a
like a
vicious cycle.
self-sustaining wheel.
Yeah.
You make people, so you're fearing parents. You cause fear for parents to say that if you don't give your child a whooping cough vaccination, okay, and then you give it to them, and then that vaccination with all the other stuff that's in it, and don't forget multiple vaccinations at once. So I think we're getting up to 7. I think in Australia we can get up to 7 vaccines in one hit now. It's overloading the body and causing more damage. So then you're creating a forever patient from a child all the way through life. And just while I've got you, because I know that everyone's got so many questions, but I was watching an interview with Dr. Mobeen that you did, and you said that you're not a big medicine person. I don't often use medicine myself, rarely.
Yeah.
Do you know something that we don't, or that our viewers don't know?
I think this is a fantastic topic that like really should be like the starting point for every conversation, probably with a physician. And the only reason it's not is because I don't think any physician really sees the world this way. But like our basic like paradigm of health and disease is fundamentally flawed. Okay. And there's like layers to the psyop, okay, with everything. Okay, there's like the first layer, and then people get beyond that, and then there's another layer to the psyop and another layer below it. And so most people, they'll get beyond the first layer, which is like they'll become disillusioned with modern medicine and the pharmaceutical industry. And then they go to like, alternative health. But what they don't realize is they're doing the exact same thing, the exact same approach, but they're just using herbs like turmeric or whatever. But it's the same approach. It's the same Band-Aid approach, right? So in order to kind of try to explain this, what I'm saying here, we live in a rational universe. I think almost maybe everyone can accept that there are causes and effects, right? Things don't just happen for no reason. We don't live in like, there's not a magician, an evil magician, sending spells against you. There is cause and there's effect, right? So there's these narratives in the mainstream media where we just don't know what causes obesity. Scientists are working on it. Maybe someday if we spend enough money on it, we'll understand it and be able to crack the code and fix it. That's complete hogwash. Okay, we know what causes things. And again, there's only so many things that can harm you, and there's only so many things that are nutrients that you need, right? And so there's a balance between these two, right? The body, like for example, if you get a cut, it just heals itself. You don't have to take like a healing pill for cuts to make your cut heal. And every tissue is like that. There's no tissue that's not like that. And we've again been given these false narratives that like the brain doesn't heal or the heart doesn't heal or whatever. They can all heal. And we've actually started to see that the brain can regenerate, the heart, even the heart can regenerate, which for when I was going through school, this was considered like it's impossible. You get a heart attack, that's it. Your heart's never going to regenerate. It's not true. Okay. Every tissue can regenerate. Even your teeth can regenerate. I mean, it's not that easy, but it can happen. Okay. So nowadays, I mean, people, if you go online, you'll find people that are like, I had a cavity, I did this and that, and the cavity went away, and I didn't go to the dentist, and now my tooth is fine. So every tissue can regenerate. Some take a lot longer, like nerves. You can't just sit there and eat all the nutrients that you need and expect your nerves to regenerate. You have to actually try to use them. You have to tell them that I still want you around, and it can take 6 months. It can take quite a while. It's not like a cut healing. But they can all regenerate. And so you take that as a starting point, that the body regenerates itself as long as you don't keep cutting yourself every day. Obviously, if you're not like outside and there's acid rain pouring on your cut every day. So the environment matters, toxins matter, right? You can call them toxins, it kind of turns some people off, but basically just define it as something that harms you. Okay. Whatever that might be. There's a lot of things under that, category. And then there's nutrients, and there's a lot of them. And people get into trouble because they don't realize some things are nutrients, right? So like sunlight is a really important nutrient. And it's more important. You can't replace it with vitamin D. That's like one thing sunlight does for you, not everything it does for you. So anyway, there's a lot of nutrients that people don't believe are nutrients that are, and there's a lot of toxins people don't believe are toxins, but actually are. Like, you inject yourself with aluminum. One of the things I see a lot, even people who are hesitant around vaccines nowadays, since they've been injured and they have allergies and stuff, they're taking allergy shots that have aluminum in them. And then like a year or two later, they'll come in with some sort of neurological issue, right? And no one's seeing this because everyone has blinders on. The patients have blinders on, the doctors have blinders on. No one expects it and no one thinks it's even possible, so they don't see it. They're like completely blind to it, right? They're not making these connections. Unless you're looking for them, you don't make the connections. So you've got toxins and nutrients. And then let's say, so this is how disease happens. It's like too many toxins, your body can't, keep a healthy state anymore. And what your body does, there's different ways of thinking about it. Your body is in a bad situation. It's like stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it's trying to maneuver around as best as possible. And so you have to understand that the body's always doing the best thing for you. Sometimes it seems like it's bad, but it's the only reason it seems that way is because you don't understand what's going on. So you have to reorient yourself and look at what's actually happening. What's happening, the metaphor for it, one of the metaphors would be a baby that's like crawling towards a fire, right? And it gets closer and closer and it starts hurting, right? And eventually, like a normal baby would stop going closer, right? We keep going closer, okay, until our skin starts to peel off and it starts to burn. And we look at our skin in the mirror and we're like, what's wrong with my skin? It's doing the wrong thing. It's doing something stupid, right? I got to stop it from doing that. And we're completely oblivious to the fact that the world works in this way where like you are essentially going towards a fire, and your body's telling you, hey, there's something dangerous here. You're going to get hurt even more if you don't leave this place, if you don't go in the opposite direction. And that, what is the fire? It's going to be things like, your diet, vegetable seed oils in your diet, and then once your metabolism gets destroyed by vegetable seed oils, then you can't handle sugar. So it's not really sugar, but it's, the fact that your cells don't work properly. And then there's going to, just refined foods in general, the junk food in general, lack of sunlight, too much light after dark, stress, fear, lack of intimacy is a big one so like some of the most important things people think are the least important, right? So like they think vitamin D is up here and intimacy is down here. It's like actually completely the opposite. Okay. So anyways, so there's these things that are missing from your life. There's a lot of stress and toxins and heavy metals and maybe chronic infections and parasites and all kinds of stuff on the toxin side. And now your body is basically starting to burn. The skin is starting to burn. Maybe you have psoriasis and it literally, there's something happening on your skin. And you look at that and you say, that's wrong. I got to stop that from happening. My body's doing something wrong for some reason I don't really understand is doing something wrong. So I'm going to put a cream on it to force it to stop. It's like as though your skin is burning in front of a fire and you start putting like a healing cream on it to stop it from burning, but keep your hand in the fire, right? So you're going to cover up some of the symptoms. You're not going to cover up everything that's going wrong, okay? Your tissues are still being damaged by whatever the problem is. And you're just not going to see it anymore. You've numbed yourself up. It's as though you like looked at your hand and you couldn't do anything, and you finally injected a nerve block so that you just can't feel the burning anymore, right? And you just look away, and I'm just going to leave my hand there over the fire. And so your body is trying to maneuver around a really bad situation and keep you as healthy as possible, and two, send you a message that hey, there's something wrong here. And so we'll look at especially at like the things that are going on under the hood, right? Like we'll check a vitamin D, or we'll check an iron level, or like you go to functional medicine, right? Like that's one step that's better than like regular medicine. And what they'll do is they'll check all your vitamins and everything, right? And say, well, this is low, this is high, let's like correct everything, right? That'll fix the problem. And the mistake there is that, again, your body's like changing things for your benefit because there's a fire right in front of you. It's like, well, since there's a fire here, I got to kind of, my skin is getting dehydrated. I got to like ramp up this hormone and ramp down that hormone. And I got to like, try to make the best of a really bad situation. Okay. And so once you start to see things this way, patients start to come to you, and you go from like, a couple of years ago, like, oh, your iron's low, you need to take iron. And then that same person comes back and they haven't followed up for a while. I mean, you probably would have caught this if they had, but like, they just don't feel good. Okay. They're taking iron and they're forcing the iron thing and they're not feeling good. And then finally they come back and they have like a blood clot in their lungs. And you're like, how is that connected, right? Like, how could that be connected? And the first step is to like, look at what you've done and assume that it might be connected to what just happened, right? And so, all I could come up with was like, if you take a lot of iron, it can raise the risk of clotting. So maybe the body was like looking at this situation. Maybe it's got spike protein in it that's like making it more prone to clotting and other things. And all the usual maneuvers that we would do to like decrease the clotting that's happening in its bloodstream just weren't working. And so it had to kind of get creative and be like, okay, let's stop absorbing iron. Let's drop the iron levels because that will make us less prone to clotting. And it was probably doing 100 other things. And now you're fighting against the body by like correcting the iron level without trusting its wisdom that it's doing something for a very good reason. This person is not in Africa. It's not like they don't eat meat. I mean, it's like they have no reason to be iron deficient, right? And you're not even asking why are they iron deficient, right? What could the possible reason be? I mean, it's in America or in Australia even. I mean, it's probably not a nutritional deficiency unless you're a vegan or something, right? So anyway, I'm not saying that every iron deficiency shouldn't be replaced, but you have to ask. You know, the first step is understanding why the problem's there. And if your doctor that you go to can't even tell you why you're sick, and they say, "Oh, we don't know, but here, take this." I mean, how can you trust that? That's ridiculous. That's insane.
So Dr. Haider, you've treated a lot of long COVID, long vax injured patients, having followed your work some, and you know, one of the things I've seen talking to people here, people with those problems have been failed by the mainstream medical system entirely, and in a lot of cases, just the way that you've said is that, well, I noticed this is low, let's raise it up. I have no idea what's really going on with you, and there does seem to be a great many people. Like first of all, a lot of vaccine injured people were gaslit and said, "Oh, it's all in your head." You know, you had people with menstrual problems, women with menstrual problems said it was hysteria and things along those lines. So the gaslighting was phenomenal. But you know, hearing what you just said, you know, it seems like you've had to try to figure out what root cause is. My understanding is that, like, if I was long, jab injured or long COVID, you're one of the few people that I would come talk to. How have you pulled apart that puzzle of what is long COVID? How do you avoid it? And how do you test and treat for it? Including what you just said. Like, where would you start?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great kind of follow on to the last question, but I just want to kind of close the loop there with the last one, that sometimes you think you're addressing the root cause and you're not. And so for example, one of the approaches to long COVID and vaccine injuries, spike injuries, is Dr. Patterson's approach, where again, it's kind of a functional medicine approach where he says, okay, the macrophages are activated by the spike protein and they're raising interleukins and these other things are going on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give you something to lower the interleukins and to turn off the macrophages, and eventually you're going to get better. And I think a lot of people, even though they might take the wrong approach of like actually fighting their own body's like wisdom in reacting to the thing, their body just gets better anyway. Okay, so like 80-90% of people, no matter what they do, they just tend to get better within 6 to 12 to 18 months. Okay, so that confuses a lot of physicians because they think, well, this is working, because I keep seeing people getting better, so I'm going to keep doing it. And they don't realize that they're actually probably slowing down the process of healing. And probably the best thing for most people would just be to leave them alone. Okay. And just, I mean, if you do anything, you would just kind of counsel them on the missing things in their life that would help their body do what it's trying to do and get rid of the problem. And so if there are missing nutrients in, if your environment is suboptimal, your body can't really do what it needs to do, right? It can't properly heal the cuts. It can't properly heal its tissues when it's not getting the proper nutrition. And so you don't, I've actually started to suggest not testing a bunch of labs and, functional medicine labs, but just trying to convince people. If I have, and the difficulty here is that it takes like an hour or two one-on-one with somebody to really transfer this whole idea to them, that like the approach of everyone, even the approach a lot of people ask me to take, and sometimes I do take because they're not willing to do anything else. And it's like, okay, I'm going to try to help you as best as I can with one hand tied behind my back because you're not, you're not with me here. but I'm going to do the best I can. I would say, my protocol, it's like public. You can find it. You go to my website, my GoToDoc, go to the bottom and just like sign up and you get this protocol, and it's free. It's pretty long. And like the hint is right there in the protocol that like the first like half of the protocol is going to be like, mental stuff, right? Emotional stuff, intimacy stuff. So yeah, somewhere towards the bottom, the protocol is there. At the very bottom of the page, you can like put in your name and select whichever protocol you want.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah. So so the most, the first third of the protocol, right at the top all on down, is going to be talking about lifestyle and what you think and what you believe and what you feel and your emotions and all this stuff. And I'm trying to convince people that that's the most important thing you can do. And yet like 99% of people are going to skip all that part and go to like, what supplements do I take and what medications do I take? And that's fine for them. But if I can sit with somebody for a couple of hours, I can usually convince them that like, hey, your whole idea of health and disease is completely upside down. You don't actually understand it, and you're actually taking the same approach that the pharmaceutical companies would have you take. You're just using, quote unquote, natural means. And the problem, just to kind of again close the loop, the problem with that is that if those things happen to address the underlying root cause, then you're probably good, right? You're good. But it's very difficult to fix like a fire in front of you. It's sure you can throw water on it and put it out, but like we don't have a lot of medications or herbs or anything that are that targeted, right? So like you throw water on the fire, it goes out. Actually, what we have is more akin to like, like a deluge, like, the flood, the biblical flood, right? Like the whole landscape gets flooded when you're just trying to put out a little fire, right? So so there's these side effects, right? Because like we just don't have this targeted approach. And if you want to do things in the optimal way, you support your body in doing what it's trying to do. That's the approach of like ancient medical systems, is like if the person is sick and they're like a little bit warm, you actually bring the fever out. You actually heat them up even more, or you give them an herb that makes them hot, or you put them in a hot bath and make them like sweat it out, right? Or put them in a sauna or whatever. And this was actually being done like 100, 120, 150 years ago in the US, all over the world. And it was working it worked during the 1918 flu pandemic. They just heated people up, like it's harder than just giving them a pill, right? But it worked. It kept people out of the hospital. It kept people alive. It worked a lot better than taking aspirin and getting rid of the fever.
That's how I break my fevers. I just go into bed, wrap myself in a blanket and sweat it out. Like, honestly, I only check my temperature every now and then because apparently you're not meant to go over 42 degrees. So as long as I'm under 42 degrees, I'll go right to 41.9 and I'll sit there shivering and sweating it out. Like I love your philosophy on medicine because it makes me feel like I'm not crazy, because I am also not a tablet taker. And even though doctors have said, you got to take this, you got to take that, you got to do this. And I had a big motorcycle accident and I smashed my face and broke all my bones and had an ulnar artery. It was big injuries, right? Really, really bad. And the doctors were surprised that within 6 to 8 weeks, I was back to work, fully normal functions. Like, so I was just back to work normally, right? So I literally had the bone come out of my arm. Okay. So it was a pretty horrific injury, care flight, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to get better.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing you've hit on. The desire to heal and like a reason to live. Okay.
Yes.
The people with the really strong desire to get better and a really strong reason to live, those are the people who get better really quickly. And so there is a big part to play of like just like getting into somebody's psyche and understanding what's going on in that specific person's life. It can make a big difference. So yeah, I think that's huge.
Wow.
That's really huge.
Is it little wonder though? You're talking about a whole list of things. You're talking about someone's psychology. You're talking about their environment, their nutrients, their absorption, even their intimacy levels. I mean, all these forces pulling and combining and really having an impact on someone. Is it any wonder that someone will walk into a doctor's surgery and say, "Hey, just give me a pill, just give me an injection, and make it all go away"?
Yeah,
I want to bring up this clip because I saw this clip through the week and it was absolutely incredible to me. This was on Channel 9 News. It was one of their reporters apparently talking about. Let's play this one.
It takes a lot to floor 9 News Seniors reporter Bruce Page, but the past few days have been miserable.
This is a man who's had 6 shots. I thought, bulletproof? No. Got me.
It's not the 75-year-old's first brush with COVID, but this round is much worse.
Knocked me over. First time was a breeze compared to this. Aches, coughing, ribs are sore from the coughing. I don't like it.
It does look like we're in the midst of a new wave. It's not just our state, it's basically the whole country. And in fact, most parts of the world are seeing a similar thing right now.
Driving the fresh threat, a family of highly contagious new subvariants called Flirt, with seniors and at-risk people who haven't had a recent booster vaccination being urged to get one.
Those people are still very susceptible, particularly with these new variants, and with case numbers rising, that will result in hospitalisations and people not surviving.
Infectious diseases experts say antiviral medications are effective if you take them early enough, though not every pharmacy has them in stock, as Bruce found.
The doctor put me on antivirals, and then the problem was trying to find a pharmacy that had them. We got lucky with number 3, and they've really made a difference.
Have a chat to your GP or pharmacist ahead of time. Come up with a plan for if you get COVID so you can get tested and get antivirals.
Bruce's advice, don't put COVID on the back seat.
Get your boosters, wear your masks, wash your hands, all the things we were told when it first hit us. This has really hit me hard. It's a wake-up call.
It takes a...
So I just think
get your boosters. Come on.
I think it's incredible. He's just said that he's had COVID and it's hit him worse than ever, despite him being 6 times vaxxed, and he's still telling people to get the booster. From your perspective, what do you think of witnessing all of that?
Yeah, so the pharmaceutical companies and just medicine in general has a really easy time because 99.99% of the time you just get better. Okay, so especially with a virus, almost everyone in the world will get a virus. No matter how bad they feel, they'll get better. No matter what they do, they're going to get better, right? So at any point in that process, if you take something, you're like, oh my God, that thing got me better. You were just getting better on your own. Okay. And especially antivirals, like I think they almost never do anything other than give you side effects and probably make you feel worse because they really only work in like the first day, max 2 days. And like hardly anyone takes them on day 1 or 2. They go like day 1, if you really focus down and like remember very clearly, or you're watching like a hawk, that first day, you barely feel like you're sick. It's like a tickle in the throat. That is day 1. Okay. And then day 2 is like barely anything more than that. By the time you actually feel sick and go to the doctor, it's like day 4 or 5 for a lot of people. And then it's day 6 or 7 when they finally get the medication. And then they take it. And by that time, almost everyone is gonna get better the next day, right? So, yeah, I mean, just the timing of the thing. And, pharmaceutical companies tell you, like with Tamiflu, for I don't know what the brand is in Australia, but, with the flu medications, they're only supposed to be prescribed in the first 2 days. And doctors, just like with antibiotics, they just prescribe them, willy-nilly. They prescribe them like candy at any time because the patients feel like they need them, that they work. So people have become, like hostages to big pharma. Their brains are hostages, right? We've been brainwashed into thinking that you need something to get better. You really don't need something. If anything, the thing that would speed up the process is literally making you feel worse. Okay, that's what makes you get better faster. Is you go through the fire and you like make the fever come out. You help your body, and so the feeling bad is not from the virus. That's the important thing people need to understand. When you feel bad, it's your immune system fighting off the thing, and there's it's a war going on, and it's a war zone, and it's like breaking some things and whatever. That's what makes you feel bad. Okay. And so if you boost that immune response and feel a little bit worse in the first few days, you will actually get back to normal much faster. And so people don't like to be uncomfortable, right? People just want to be made comfortable no matter what, right? We've really become pathologically comfort seeking in the modern world. And it's because things have gotten easier and easier and easier, right? Like the things our ancestors put up with would like destroy us now. Okay. I mean,
do you mind if I ask, one of the things that I learned from the FLCCC that goes a little bit the other way from what you're saying, and let me know whether you think it's incorrect, is an early treatment protocol where, when you do get that tickle in your throat and you gargle, you might do an iodine rinse. I mean, there are studies that say people who do that had much lower rates of hospitalization, or take ivermectin. There are studies that do seem to say that
no, absolutely. So yeah, if you get it early, and if you get to the thing early enough, which is what I've told people too, at the very first sign, if you want to stop this thing, the only way to stop it, without feeling sick, is like at the first sign of the tickle in the throat, which almost no one will do. I'm just telling you right now.
I've learned
they're not willing to do it. So I've told people that, like, and I've tried to give people tools that they feel comfortable taking at the first sign. So like almost no one is willing to take ivermectin at the first sign because they've spent like hundreds of dollars on it, and they want to save it up and use it when they're actually sick, right? With COVID, it has to be proven to them that they have COVID to use it, which is unfortunately too late. Because if you're really paying close attention, there's going to be a few times a year where you feel a little tickle in your throat and then it goes away and it turns into nothing. And then some other times where it turns into something. So anyway, so I've told people, okay, there are a bunch of things you can do. Okay, you don't have to take the expensive ivermectin. You could just take vitamin C, for example, really big doses, right? Again, that makes people feel uncomfortable. So if you don't want to do that, of course, iodine, hydrogen peroxide, nasal rinses, copper wands. You can get these copper wands that you can, kind of like sweep through your mouth and nose that just kill everything on contact. So there's a lot of things that you can do that work like a charm if you do them at the very, very, very first sign, and you'll kill the thing, right at the very beginning. And why that's so important is that, like, once it gets going, it gets this like inertia, right? It's like very difficult to stop, and you don't realize that, like, day one of symptoms, just that little tickle in the throat, it's already been there for like 5 days. It's been multiplying for 5 days, right? And so you need to just like carpet bomb it in a way that doesn't hurt you. And so there are things you can do. I mean, like, this gets people banned, but chlorine dioxide is another thing that's super cheap. It's just used to like clean water and, the backwoods when you're, camping. You can put a few drops of this thing in your water and it kills everything in the water. It does the same thing in your body. If you take a little bit, just tiny amount of it, very safe. IP6 is another thing that inositol hexaphosphate works really well for some people. So you could do 4 or 5 of those things that are like really easy to pull the trigger on, and you won't get sick, right? And so I think with COVID, right, with the fear that we're being exposed to a bioweapon, the spike protein, definitely I've told people, take that approach, because we're not dealing with a normal virus. We're not dealing with like normal world anymore. We're in a different world. Yeah. So, if you let it go and it enters your bloodstream, then you're more at risk. You're getting a big load of spike protein every time you get this thing, but especially in the, maybe 30-40% of people where it enters the bloodstream and just travels everywhere, and, you get spike deposited all over the place. So this is something that you would rather avoid, especially if you've had it a few times, especially if you've already had long COVID or vaccine injury. But yeah, you can do it, but you got to like strike it when the iron's hot, like right at the very, very beginning. And so you got to be ready. You got to have all the stuff on hand. You got to know exactly what you're going to do. Go through it in your mind, right? This is what I'm going to do. And then when it happens, you do it. So yeah, that is something that's possible.
On hand in your house in case of emergency, break glass. Don't be afraid to use the basic stuff to lower the viral load at the very beginning. And in your practice, do you find that the people who do early treatment have a good, significantly lower rate of long COVID? I would imagine that only makes sense.
If you treat it on day one, you basically don't get long COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
If you treat it properly. So no matter what I say, I can say as much as I want. I can go on for hours. A lot of people they're just not going to follow the instructions, right? So if you follow the instructions, if you use 3 or 4 of these things on day one, it's extremely rare for you to be sick the next day. Okay. And I've used a few of them, right? Like again, going back to the vitamin C, I mean, I've tried it myself, and like literally you're just better the next day if you do it on day one. If you wait until day 3 or 4, I mean, everything gets way, way, way less effective. So the important thing is understanding what day one feels like. And again, it's going to feel like just slightly different than normal, right? Barely different. That's day one. So So as long as you understand what day one is of the symptoms, you know, I keep repeating myself because it's like people still, you know, I'll tell people this over and over again, and they don't get it, and they still wait until day 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, if you really want to.
Yeah, I've changed the way I've gone about that. Like, well, I do now what you're saying. Like on day one, I hit it with the vitamin C, andrographis, zinc, a zinc ionophore, and yeah, then because what you do, I agree from my personal experience, what you do on the first one day or two matters more than what you do during the rest of the time. But
I do want to just mention one other thing. Just like one of the things that gives me some pause in these discussions is that I do think that the body uses these things happening maybe once a year or maybe less often as kind of an excuse to detoxify. And so like the illness itself is a means of your body being given a little bit of assistance to like expel stuff that's kind of built up over time. So if you're not allowing that to happen with an upper respiratory thing, you need to focus more on other avenues of detoxification. Make sure your bowels are moving properly, maybe sweat every day, right? Like get into a sauna, maybe once a week even, right? Like you gotta stimulate your detox. And where do you detoxify? Where do things leave your body from? It's from your skin through sweat. It's through your stools, right? When you get diarrhea or something, you breathe things out, right? Or you get this mucus and stuff and start having runny nose and coughing stuff up. This is like an avenue of detoxification, and through your urine. So these are the avenues of detox, and your liver, your kidneys, and your skin and your lungs. So you need to probably focus more on helping your body detoxify throughout the year, rather than relying on these illnesses when you're nipping them in the bud like that over and over again. So I do think that, again, people will feel great and they'll feel like they're doing the right thing, but then your body kind of naturally wants to release some of this stuff, especially in the modern world where we're exposed to so much of it. People get sick more often for a reason. They just have a lot more to release. They have more stuff in them that they need to get out. So again, I think that's one way of seeing things. And again, I'm not like saying that this is absolutely true, but I do tend to believe that that's kind of one of the reasons you get sick with like a cough or a cold or a flu is you've been breathing in a lot of junk for the months and months or years, and your body just wants to release all that stuff, and it needs kind of an excuse to do it in a big kind of spasm of like illness. And so again, the modern world is a little different. The last few years, spike protein, different story. But since you are nipping those kind of paroxysms in the bud, you should focus more on just general detox throughout the year and other ways of triggering it, right? There's detox diets, there's supplements that can help you detox.
So the rules are a little different if it's a bioweapon. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's what I'm basically what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
So then so no matter what, if you think you're going to get, if you think you've been exposed to COVID, you should really go on like, the nasal cleaning and the mouth washing and things like that. It's better probably not to let yourself get the virus. Because I was going to ask you, I say maybe it's just better just to get COVID and just get it done so that your body's becomes immune to it.
So I think everyone at this point is immune to it, honestly, right? Like everyone either symptomatically or asymptomatically. So, people who are super healthy and they don't need an excuse to detox, they'll catch these things and just release them, right? It's a catch and release kind of phenomenon where you don't even realize you've become immune because it hasn't risen to the level of your consciousness, right? So it did multiply for a few days, but your immune system just wiped it out, took care of it, and developed immunity. So I think it would be close to impossible that anyone in the world at this point, especially in an industrialized country, has not been exposed, whether or not they got sick or diagnosed with it. Everyone's been exposed.
Can I ask you about
Sorry, Paul, real quick. So it's almost better than like if you're like a healthy person, so you would call yourself healthy, okay? So you don't often get sick. You're reasonably young. You're reasonably fit. You're reasonably healthy. Have a balanced life as per se. Bit of sun, bit of food, bit of this, bit of that, right? Like then better off maybe not to do anything, and just let the body do what it needs to do.
So this is a key point, right? If you start getting symptoms, like so say day one of symptoms, right? That little tickle in the throat. Yep. Again, you've been exposed to it already for 5 days. You're already immune to it. You can kill it at that point and retain your immunity, right? You can wipe it out with like all the general things, even ivermectin, and it doesn't mean you're not going to be immune, right? Okay. Because again, you've it's been multiplying in your body for 4 or 5 days already. So your immune system has had a chance to develop immunity for the next time around. So, it's really up to the person what they believe about the nature of reality and health and illness. And, I'm here to kind of like give them some guidance. And some people, it's better for them to like not even let themselves get so concerned that they bother to treat it. And that lets them stay so far away from the fear that that's actually better for them, even though it might be a bioweapon, right? So for some people, you have to assess, like, what does this person deeply believe about reality? Because your belief about health and illness, and even about the bioweapon and about the virus, will affect your body's response to it. Okay. And again, like, that's probably even more important than the virus itself and the spike protein itself, is what you believe about it. And I just want to, there's some really amazing research that's been done on this that just really drives home the point. Okay. So 2 studies that I'm aware of where what people thought about how healthy somebody thought that they were themselves was okay, so I'm saying it wrong. The healthier people thought that they were, so the people who thought they were the healthiest out of this study, they were 6 times less likely to die, okay, than the people who thought that they were the sickest. And the key point here is it didn't matter what their doctors thought about them. It only mattered what they thought about their own health. So most physicians, their entire purpose of their existence is to convince you you're sick so that you need their services and to take what they're prescribing you. So like, I really hesitate to send anyone to a doctor's office or a hospital unless they're like dying, right? Like, it's extremely rare. When I tell somebody to go to the hospital, they really need to go to the hospital, okay? Because like, it's one of those emergency situations where like, really, you need the emergency services, right? That are only possible with modern medicine. So I think during the pandemic, like from the beginning until today, there's like 2 people maybe out of tens of thousands of people that I told to go to the hospital. Okay. And the recent one, like I called them on the phone, like they texted me and I called them back and I spent like 30 minutes explaining to them that this is really, really serious. Okay. I'm pretty sure that you have severe hyponatremia and you can die if it's not taken. It has to be taken care of. You have to check labs every 4 hours. You have to tweak things very, very carefully. And so they went to the hospital. But yeah, usually physicians say the wrong thing. They kind of curse you. It's like the opposite of a placebo effect. They nocebo affect you. Okay. They give you these curses, these like beliefs that like weasel their way into the back of your mind that like you're not going to get better. You can't get better, and they create problems instead of getting rid of them. So the mind is very powerful. What you believe is very powerful. And I don't want to mess with somebody who believes that they're rock solid and like bulletproof. I'm not going to mess with that belief and try to convince them that they're not. It's better for them to believe that than to not believe it, than to start having doubts about it.
Wow. So with all due respect for the power of positive thinking, which I do think has a great deal of power, and my partner Stephanie is all into manifesting your reality, and I get the feeling you're a good manifester, Dr. Haider. But to kind of go on another angle, to what degree when it comes to dealing with disease, given that we have an injection that has perhaps primed the immune system for antigenic sin and a mismatching antibodies and plasmid contamination. I have seen some young and otherwise healthy, positive people, one of whom I was a friend of my partner's son, who at 25 just got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis because his pupils were dilating differentially. And he's got, there are some real problems that seem, that the person didn't have a negative outlook that I know of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like, even if you think you're bulletproof, you're not literally bulletproof, right? You're not actually bullets won't bounce off of you, right? So certainly, like, if somebody fires a bullet at any human being, it's going to go through them, right? So we know that. So there are some causes in the universe that can overwhelm this like positivity and this positive belief and whatever, right? So, but the important thing is that it's hard to determine that beforehand. It's very difficult to determine. I mean, you can have all these theories, right? Fancy theories about what's going on in people, and it certainly probably applies to some people and it doesn't apply to other people, and you don't know which one's which. You don't know who is really having, their entire body is like, you know, their proteins are misfolding and they've got like, you know, microclots everywhere, without looking. And so, I mean, it's tough. It's difficult to just do a one size fits all like approach with medicine because everyone is so different. So unless a doctor can really sit down with you for like 2 or 3 hours, you're not going to be well served by that physician, unfortunately. And so the optimal approach to medicine is to like go away from this, like just like let's just check labs and like just really high throughput, like 5 minutes or 15 minutes each patient, and just give them the thing and make a lot of money. So you have to switch that, flip that on its head, sit with somebody for quite a while. And when I've done this, you know, I've had a lot of experience with like 15-minute consults and a little bit of experience with like 2 or 3 hour consults. You get into things that would like that shock you, like the things that you discover about that person's life and the things that are contributing to their illness or their health. It usually starts in your childhood with some like way of interacting with the world, and there's usually some like dysfunctional way that the person learns to interact with the world, and it usually manifests as some physical symptom, you know, in before they get to 20. And then a lot of their health is stemming from that initial kind of like, you know, original sin of their life, right? And they don't realize it, and then they start taking medications that cover up the symptoms one by one, and those things allow the problem to get worse and pop up somewhere else, right? And a lot of times they get side effects that, like, if you look at the list of side effects, you'll say that like the next illness was literally just a side effect of the first drug that you took. And so you can kind of trace back from the beginning up to the current day, bit by bit, and kind of show them that there's this story that's happened over your life, and this is why you're sick. And the way to like reverse that is to stop doing all the wrong things and start focusing on the things that really matter. And again, getting back to that belief in like how healthy you are, the most powerful outcome in a study is death. Okay. So if just what you believe about yourself can affect when you die, and there's other studies on this topic as well, that like people literally, like the day that they die can be affected by what they believe. Okay. People will they're much less likely to die on a holiday. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not normal. Okay. I mean, that is another proof that, you know, what people believe affects them so deeply. If it can affect your death, it can affect anything less than that, right? Everything else is below death, right? So death is the ultimate illness, you know, the thing that kills you. That's the most powerful effect that you can possibly have, is to like hold back death itself, right? If your beliefs can do that, then they can really do anything. So
Dr. Haider, we're getting towards the end now, but before we let you go, I want to ask you on censorship, because here in Australia, we're facing some upcoming misinformation, disinformation legislation that's being proposed by the government. And in my opinion, censorship has never worked. So I don't know why you would want to impose censorship. But during COVID, a lot of things were censored. A lot of doctors were censored. I'm sure you were one of them. If we didn't have censorship during COVID, do you think we would have handled it differently?
So, you know, it's difficult to say because, you know, what is censorship, right? So there's like these approved narratives. Everyone was watching the mainstream media. And so I'm not really convinced that it would have been a whole lot different. It would have been different on the edges, certainly, right? Like the people who wanted to do things differently, you know, already would have done them differently. But like the vast majority of people in any country would have kind of gone along, is what I believe. Okay. You hear something, right? This comes from the Nazis, right? That like you can, if you want to convince people of something, you just lie really big, and then you just repeat it over and over again, and eventually people accept it as the truth, right? A huge lie. You go really big, right? You make it really big. And then this time, you know, since then, you know, all this like pushback from parts of society. Now I think, unfortunately, the kind of like the narratives have leaked into layer 2, you know, which is the alternative media. People are convinced of like, again, like the same paradigm as the mainstream paradigm, but in a different way. And so I don't know that people have actually escaped the matrix. They've just gotten to a different level of the matrix, even in the alternative media, unfortunately. And the I think that the intelligence agencies, they're everywhere, right? They're one of the ways that they work to create division is by like seeding all these like conflicting narratives, right? You've got like all this, viruses exist, viruses don't exist, vaccines are the way to go, vaccines are not the way to go. I mean, it's like there's so many of these that like even people in kind of the medical freedom movement are fighting each other over like what's true, what's not true. So at the end of the day, like I think people need to be a bit humble, because I feel that like really it's like a post-truth kind of reality. It's very difficult to like really be certain of things anymore, right? So I think the people who come out and they're just like, I'm 100% sure that this is the case, it's like I find it very difficult to believe them, that they're being honest with themselves, just because we have access to like insufficient information, right? And there are gatekeepers to all the information. There's like the studies that have been done aren't great. I mean, there's flaws in everything, right? There's flaws in your sources of information, and you just we're at the mercy of the information that we have. And so you can make some conclusions based on what you've seen and what you have access to, but it's not oftentimes direct knowledge. It's not something you've seen with your own eyes, right? It's not something like you sitting in a clinic and you did this and this happened. It's very, very indirect, right? There's a lot of intermediaries between you and most of the information that you're basing your worldview on. So anyway, it's like I don't know if that's a satisfactory response, probably not. But I think that the powers that be are always, going to try to stay one step ahead of everyone, and probably try to do the same thing in a different way in the future, and like attack us from within somehow, right? From within the medical freedom movement. And we're going to feel like when Twitter became open again, I mean, I find it very difficult to believe that it actually is. It's probably the same thing's going on, but now it's like behind a veil. It's gotten more hidden than it was before. And we're just you're in your little echo chamber, right? Like they give you freedom of speech but not reach. Like how is that freedom of speech when they're artificially limiting how far certain tweets go, and then like injecting porn bots into your replies so that limits your reach? And it's like people are enamored of certain personalities, and like, oh, this person's fighting for freedom of speech. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I don't think the intelligence agencies gave up their control of any of the social media platforms. If they just appeared to, perhaps, and maybe Elon Musk and other people really believe that they're doing something to fight against these powers that be, but they've I mean, they're a lot better at what they do than we are. Okay, they're the experts at spy craft, and they will continue to insert people into every level of these things, right? Like in the past, the what we saw in the last few decades, like you knew that the person was ex-CIA, and yet you still listened to what they were saying on mainstream media, right? There are all these ex-CIA that were at Twitter. Like this person used to be CIA, now they're at Twitter, and you're like, there is no ex-CIA. You're never ex-CIA.
Yeah.
The next step is that you never know that they were CIA to begin with, and they're at Twitter, and they're all over the place at Twitter. They're at every level of Twitter, or you just go and flip them, right? They weren't CIA to begin with, and you go and turn them into a double agent, right? So this stuff is going on, and we need to understand that like these people aren't children. Okay, these people are really, really smart. We can't underestimate them and think that they're so stupid, right? They want us to think that they're stupid. The people at the top are extremely intelligent. Okay, I mean, so I don't know.
My mate always says that, Dr. Syed. He always says it. He goes, the government's just so stupid, they don't know what they're doing. I say that's what they want you to think, because they know exactly what they're doing and they're getting the results that they want.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a game, right? Certainly some of the people are quite stupid, but they're just the stooges, right? They're just the front men for the people in the back, right? I mean, they're not the real power, right? Justin Trudeau's not the real power in Canada. I mean, come on. No. Biden's not really in power.
No.
How could he be, right?
100% agree with you on what you're saying right now. I think it's beyond most of us, isn't it? To comprehend it. You just have to take. I think, like, I'm so lucky that I get opportunities with Stephen and Paul to speak to people like you, because even though we're a world apart, I'm looking you in the eye, even though it doesn't look like that, and I'm seeing what you're saying, and I'm like, you know what? I think I can now go to your website, look at your protocols, and go, you know what? I really do feel that this person is actually trying to help me the best way he can, and I think that's what I think we try to do with this kind of platform, is for our viewers to actually say, well, I'm actually having a one-on-one with this person and seeing them for who they are, because let's face it, no one even knows Elon Musk, really. Like, all these all these agencies and things that are going on, no one really knows the government, no one really knows what's going on, but for us, face to face, your website, your protocol, we can then look at that and go, well, I've spoken to this guy, or he's spoken to me through a podcast, I kind of look him in the eye, I trust this guy, let's go for it and let's give it a go.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, just a few kind of closing comments. Like, I've kind of alluded to, like, what's the most important thing. I just want to mention that, like, the single, like, greatest predictor of longevity has nothing to do with exercise or what you eat or whatever, right? It's how many intimate relationships you have in your life. That predicts more than anything else how long you'll live, which, again, it's like the things that keep you alive longer, that's like the ultimate outcome of any study, and that's like the ultimate thing that you should be looking for, because if it can keep you alive longer, it can clear up other problems as well. And this is probably the biggest, like, issue that we have in modern societies is intimacy, right? We don't even know how to be intimate anymore with people, like, even with our most intimate relationships, right, in our family and significant others, wives and husbands, let alone with our friends, right? So there's different kinds of intimacy with different people, and we just have to, like, get back to the basics. I mean, one of the tools you can use, I mean, you have to kind of, like, fake it till you make it with some of these things. You go and look, there's this website called 36 Questions in Love. There was a study done where somebody was trying to figure out the questions that would be most, like, powerful in creating intimacy between two strangers, and they go from, like, less intimate to more intimate, and then there's, like, card games and stuff that have similar approaches, but you can just, like, start there and just, like, start with, your husband or wife or whatever, and just start asking those questions, and just make it kind of, like, fun and make it like a game. And then the ones that are appropriate, you can do it with your buddies and your friends and stuff. And you just have to, you have to focus on this. This is really important. And then there's other things that, again, I had mentioned that people don't realize that they're necessary. So there's this whole field of, like, photobiology. The sun is incredibly important for our health. And it should make sense that, like, whether you believe in, like, intelligent design, or whether you believe in, evolution, either way, we should be optimally designed for the planet that we're living on, right? Like, we're not aliens to this planet. This should be our optimal environment, right? So how could it be possible that the environment is actually harmful? It's not, okay? So there are a lot of lines of evidence that seem to suggest the sun causes cancer and all these things. It doesn't, right? But anyway, like, there's a lot more to it. And if you're not convinced, you should really convince yourself, because once you understand your enemy, then you are going to, like, once you understand how terrible your enemy is, how formidable they are, you are going to be willing and able, and you will do what it takes to overcome them. And once you understand how beneficial something is for you, you will want to do it, right? So you have to learn, like, knowledge is where everything starts. And it's because of that, because it drives action. Once it really sinks deep into your heart and you're like, oh, I have to get sunlight, or, oh, I have to avoid this thing, like vegetable oils, then you'll become like a crusader for it, right? But it only happens once it settles deep into your heart that, like, this thing is truly, truly harmful. And if you're doing something and you think at some level that it's harmful, it hasn't gotten deep enough yet, right? The belief is not strong enough in its harm, okay? And it's the same thing with spiritual matters, where there's, like, sins, for example. The only reason people commit sins is because they don't deeply believe that they are truly harmful in this life and in the next life. And the same with, like, good things. So everything is a matter of, like, strengthening your belief in it. That's really the primary thing. You have to strengthen your belief in things, and that only comes from learning more about them, hearing other people's experience with them. So there's this process of education, which is really, really primary in health and disease.
It's interesting that you bring up intimacy, because my mother was studying psychology at university when I was young, and they did a study where they had a monkey in each room with a mannequin. The first mannequin was just made out of mesh, and it had a bottle there, so the monkey always had food. And the other mannequin was made of fur, so the monkey had something to cuddle into, and the monkey with the food died first. So intimacy is incredibly powerful. But we better finish up. Paul, you were a big part of facilitating this interview. I'm going to give you the final opportunity to ask Dr. Haider a question.
Well, it's a hard one, because the way he wrapped up was probably one of the most powerful things that he could have said. So honestly, I think I will take a pass on that, because I think that the way he wrapped up was probably the way things should wrap up. So I would just say, Dr. Haider, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for looking after people when other doctors wouldn't. Thank you for your research, and I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And in 2 days' time will be our second anniversary of the XCandidates. Adam and I started this 2 years ago. Would you believe it or not? So thank you very much for celebrating this with us. I forgot to mention it at the top of the show, but I'm mentioning it now. So you're a more than fitting guest to have for our 2-year anniversary. So thank you.
Congratulations. You guys are doing great work.
Thank you very much.
And how do people follow you if they want to keep up to date with all your work?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter. So it's @DrSyedHaider, so @Dr. Syed Haider, or you can go to my GoToDoc. I also have a Substack. You can find that at blog.mygotodoc.com. So those are probably the best places.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much again. For everyone who is watching, please share this out. I say it every single time, but it's so important. Share. It is so important for people to do so, because we really rely on our audience to support us, so we can continue to try and get fantastic guests like the one tonight. And I'll myself will definitely be sharing this out and watching it back multiple times as well, just to try and absorb all the information that was presented tonight. But also remember, 1 week to go to the 2024 Environment and Energy Forum. Get your tickets if you can. If you're in Sydney, we'd love to see you there. So thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
See ya.
Bye.